Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to today's webinar, the 6 Keys to Standout Social Marketing. Hope everyone is having a good afternoon. We're going to get started in a second with this very special webinar featuring Mike Lewis. He's the author of a brand new social marketing book, aptly titled Standout Social Marketing. It's really I would say it's unlike any social media management, social media marketing book that you've ever read. We're really proud of it here at Awareness. Mike is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Awareness. So we're really excited to conduct this webinar based on that book, and we're really excited to share these insights with you this afternoon. Wanted to take care of a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. One is a lot of people ask, will we be recording this webinar? And the answer to that is yes. We are recording today's webinar. We will post the recorded webinar up on the Awareness website, and we will send everybody in attendance an email with that link probably tomorrow, assuming we can get everything processed that fast. It might be Monday, but we're going to aim for tomorrow. So feel free to take notes. But if you do miss anything, if you have to jet away from your desk, or if you want to share this with anybody who is not in attendance, you will have the opportunity to share this webinar with them. A couple other housekeeping items. We do want today's presentation to be both informative and interactive. So we will be taking questions. We will do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. The Q&A, so we encourage questions throughout the webinar. We're going to save the questions to the end to keep the flow going. There's 2 ways to submit questions. You can submit questions in the Q&A in WebEx, or even better, submit questions on Twitter with hashtag AwarenessInc. Again, that's hashtag AwarenessInc. We'll try to remind you of that hashtag throughout the webinar. But please submit your questions throughout, and we'll try to get to as many as possible at the end. We also do have WebEx on the line to help us out. So if you do have any technical issues, they will be able to help you with that. If you're running into any audio issues or anything like that, you will be able to access WebEx help. Again, best way to do that is through the chat, through the Q&A on WebEx. And before we get started, I just want to say this webinar is brought to you by Awareness Inc. Awareness is a company that makes social media management software solutions. Our flagship product is the Awareness Social Marketing Hub. Awareness Social Marketing Hub allows you to manage multiple social channels through one easy-to-use interface. So basically connecting all your Facebook, your Twitter, Flickr, YouTube, Foursquare channels, and more, all into one place for easy social media management. It also features the industry's only social marketing automation suite. It allows you to find prospects on the social web, gather social profiles, the sum total of that person's footprint on the social web, and allows you to conduct social scoring, customized scoring that allows you to segment the entire social audience, both your fans and your non-fans, into meaningful segments that have business value to you. Allows you to find influencers, find buying prospects, find really anybody who fits a specific criteria, as long as they're active on the social web. So I do encourage anybody who is interested in that to sign up for a demo on the Awareness website. We'd love to talk about the Social Marketing Hub a little bit more with you. But today I want to get to our presentation, so I will now introduce Mike Lewis to talk about 6 keys to standout social marketing.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate. First of all, you for the intro, and second, everybody taking some time today to hear what I have to say and to talk about the book. What I'm going to cover with everybody today, and I'll talk about a little bit more, is the 6 keys to standing out on the social web. People always ask me why I decided to take on a task like writing a book over a year ago, and the reason is at Awareness specifically, I have the opportunity to work with a lot of large and small brands, and one of the struggles that they've always had and that I've seen them have and they've talked about and I've had the chance to consult with them on it is the fact that there's so many voices, there's so many brands, there's so many names, there's so many people, there's so much noise on the social web. How is it possible to stand out? How is it possible to rise above the noise? And through all these interactions and answering that question for several of our clients, it just became really natural. This was a great fit to write a book about, because I think this is something that a lot of brands are struggling with. So, Sal gave kind of a high-level overview of who I am. Let me give you a little bit more detail on that. Again, my name is Mike Lewis. That picture up on the screen, I am the guy on the left. not the guy on the right. That little guy on the right is my son Frankie. Keep him in the back of your head because he's going to play a role in one of the stories I'm going to tell you in just a minute. But I run sales and marketing here at Awareness. I actually have two children. I'm a dad. That's the job I'm most proud of, and fortunately the one I spend most of my time doing. I have a daughter, Vienna, as well, who's 1 year old, just turned 1 in October. Been active on the social web for a long time, and I'm obviously the author of Standout Social Marketing, which brought me here today. I encourage you to reach out and touch base with me through any of the channels that are listed here. That's my blog, standoutsocialmarketing.com. Obviously on Facebook, Standout Social, or on Twitter, you can connect with me directly at Boston Mike. Also, if you're on LinkedIn, drop me a request. I'd love to connect with you, and hopefully we have a chance to chat or work together in the future. You can also buy the book. If you haven't bought the book already, I can't encourage it enough. If you've already bought the book, feel free to go back on and buy 10 or 100 copies more. The holiday season's approaching, and these just make awesome stocking stuffers. Of course, I'm totally biased, but feel free to jump on, and there's a tiny URL for you. Just go to tinyurl.com/standoutmarketing, and it'll take you right to the Amazon page, and you can buy a copy of the book, which will actually cover. We're going to take a high-level overview of the book today, but the book actually gets into a lot more of the nuts and bolts of everything, some of the concepts that you're going to see me talk about today. Sal mentioned we want this session to be really interactive, and I really want this session to be interactive. So as many questions as you have, feel free to ask them. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, there's the hashtag for today's event, which is Pound Awareness Inc. So feel free to tweet any questions, tweet me directly. Do whatever it is you do to get those questions in. I'd love to answer them at the end. I'm going to save plenty of time to hopefully answer as many questions as possible at the end. I also encourage you to visit my blog, standoutsocialmarketing.com, and throughout the presentation, you're going to see some words in a box up here in the lower right-hand corner. So, for example, if you were to go to the blog right now, which is standoutsocialmarketing.com, and in the search box in the upper right-hand corner, if you were to type in NOV15, November 15th, you would be directed to the SlideShare presentation of this event, so you'd be able to download all the slides right from there. So you're going to see some keywords throughout. I hope you have the chance to visit the blog and interact with it and comment on any of the posts that I have up there. You'll find that there's a bunch of case studies, infographics, ton of infographics, some really great ones. We keep producing more. I keep putting some more up there, so feel free to check it out. I'd love your feedback on it. So that's enough about me and enough about the blog and enough about a high level about what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Because at the end of this, I think what you're gonna realize is there are some really important things that a lot of brands either overlook or haven't had the time to do yet or haven't thought about yet that can help them rise above the noise and stand out in social media. And to illustrate that for you, I'd like to share a personal story with you. Some of you may have heard this, and this is actually, if you've read the book, you'll know that this is one of the first stories in the book. It's a story of my interactions with Delta Airlines, and I can tell you they haven't always been great. In fact, the reason that I initially started flying Delta was simply because they were a Boston hub. As it turns out, they have a lot of planes that fly out of Boston that happen to be going where I need to go, so I ended up flying Delta a lot. And the challenge I have, quite frankly, is that I tend to leave. I have to leave my son at home when I travel, my son and daughter at home when I travel, and like any dad, I always want to be home and watch them, grow up, and it's a challenge. So I'm always trying to rebook my travel to get home as early as possible, as soon as meetings end, and that kind of thing. And in fact, just about a year ago, I had traveled from Boston to Tampa, Florida, for a conference called Social Fresh. If you get the chance, you can check out Social Fresh on the blog. It's a great conference, features a lot of case studies and industry experts. It's one of my favorites. It's run by a guy by the name of Jason Keith. But I went down there and did my session. Obviously, I flew Delta, had a great session. We talked about social media ROI and just really enjoyed meeting with everybody down there. So I even stuck around and networked with some folks and had some fun. And I'm going to ask you to ignore those pictures of me with beers in my hands, because the minute the networking session was done, I got in my car and was driving to Tampa International Airport. Now, to be clear, this story isn't going where you probably think it's going or where I've built it up to be going. I was about halfway to the airport, and I said something I never do. I said, you know what, I'm going to just check the time of the flight, make sure it's on time, and make sure I'm getting out easily tonight. And lo and behold, as I pulled up my iPhone and checked it, turns out I was actually heading to the airport on the wrong day, which, and some of you may laugh and say, well, this guy's completely absent-minded. The truth is, when you travel a lot, and anybody on the call that does, I'm sure there's a lot of people that travel a lot here, the fact of the matter is, schedules get jumbled in your head and you forget when you're traveling back. So I did what anybody would do, and I called Delta, and I got a very nice gentleman on the phone. I'm not sure if this was him or not. I like to think, maybe he was dressed a little differently, the guy I talked to. But a really nice Delta service rep on the phone who spent some time talking to me, and he said, "Look, I can absolutely help you out. The only challenge is it's going to take about a half hour, 45 minutes to book you on tonight's flight as opposed to tomorrow. Our systems are experiencing a huge delay, and we're having some issues." So I said, "Fine, if you can get me on the flight." So I waited on the phone with him for about a half hour. He chatted me up a little bit, asked me why I was going home and where I lived, and he had lived in Boston, and had a really nice conversation. And sure enough, about a half hour, 45 minutes later, as I was driving, or actually as I pulled into the airport, he came on and said, "Great news, we got you booked on the flight." So I got to the airport, checked in at the kiosk, got my tickets, and just as got to the plane, and just as the doors were closing and the flight attendant had come on the PA to explain that we needed to put away our electronic devices, I was able to send out a tweet. The tweet was really simple, straightforward. It was, "I'm on a Nat Delta flight leaving Tampa. Can't wait to get home. And as a side note, Delta customer service rocks. I said it before, continue to be impressed." Flew all the way back up to Boston, got to see Frankie, which made me incredibly happy. I went to bed happy. And I went to bed happy not even thinking about the fact that I had sent out a tweet to Delta. And I didn't think about that tweet until the very next day when I woke up in the morning. What I found was a very nice tweet back from Delta that said, "Thanks for your comment. We hope you had a great trip home to that new baby." And I was floored by it. I thought, wow, this is terrific. This is an airline, in my opinion, going above and beyond. An industry that typically treats people as numbers, and I can recite to you what my Delta Airlines number is today. I couldn't then, but I can today. That typically treats you as numbers. They had actually called me out individually. They knew what was motivating me to get home. Not just I needed to get on an earlier flight, but the reason I wanted to get home was to see my child. And actually, as I stopped and started to think about it a little bit, I focused in on a few words, and it was "to that new baby." And I started thinking about it. And the more I thought about it, kind of the creepiness factor set in of the fact that Delta had called out the fact that I had a new baby at home. And I thought to myself, man, how the heck did they know that? How did they know that I had a new baby at home? And I started thinking and thinking and thinking about it even more. And I was sure it had something to do with this guy. I'm not sure how he was involved, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with him. And let me explain to you what I thought happened behind the scenes, the situation that I thought and how it rose. I basically thought that I got this gentleman on the phone who talked to me for a little bit and was able to book me on an earlier flight, back to Boston. And all the while, as we were chatting it up for half hour, 45 minutes, he pulled up his handy CRM system, and as we were talking, he started filling in notes across the screen, explaining why I was going home, who I was, probably filling in a bunch of other pieces of information as I was doing this. Immediately, as I got on the plane, I sent out a tweet, and as that tweet went out, I was pretty sure that all across Delta alerts went off. In fact, at this point, I'm pretty sure even the CEO of Delta was notified that this guy, Boston Mike, had sent out a tweet, which caused them to go and look and pull up my profile and say, man, this is how we need to respond to this guy. This is why he's heading home. So they personalized that tweet back for me. Now, being the absolute social media nerd that I am, I immediately started to think and figure out how they did this, and I was inspired to call Delta, which I did, and I got a very nice woman on the phone by the name of Rachel, and Rachel, asked me what I thought happened, and after I explained the story to her, and after she stopped laughing, she told me what actually happened, and the fact of the matter is, it was that I was traveling back in the wintertime. It was February, as you saw probably on some of the tweets, and there was a pretty bad snowstorm that hit the Washington D.C. area. The challenge was it knocked out travel for a lot of the country, made it really difficult for people to get around. In fact, I used to pull up the Delta Twitter stream from that day as part of the story, and I had to stop because some of the words were so bad that people were using to describe Delta. I mean, these were hateful tweets coming out. She was the only person manning the social web for Delta that night, was seeing a heck of a lot of negativity out there, and when my tweet came in, it was the lone positive response, and frankly, a sea of negativity on the social web towards Delta. So she clicked through my profile. It stood out to her. She clicked into my profile, clicked on a link that brought her to my Facebook page, and she noticed that I had a baby. She herself was about 6 or 7 months pregnant. She immediately connected with me and realized that the reason I must be going home was to see my son. Now, not as exciting as what I thought happened, I'll grant that, but really important nonetheless. A really important story nonetheless, because it illustrates a lot of the points that are contained in the book, a lot of the points that I make in terms of how brands can stand out on social media. And if you want some more details on Delta, you can go over to the blog and type in Delta. They certainly haven't done everything perfectly, nor has any airline, and a lot of them have a lot of scrutiny in social media. But they've been really great for me, and this experience was really standout for me for a couple of reasons. But first, let me explain the 6 areas that we're going to focus on and what the book covers in a lot of detail. Now, we're going to be talking about these at a high level, and I am going to drill into specific concepts for each one, some a little bit deeper than others. So I hope you feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Basically, the way the book is organized and how I frame it is that these are the high-level areas that companies need to focus on in order to stand out. They're paying attention. When I talk about paying attention, what I'm really talking about is listening to people, the conversations they're having, but more importantly, understanding the behaviors that they're taking. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. How you interact with people, how you communicate back and forth, and the way I describe it in the book is if paying attention is the yin of social media, interaction is absolutely the yang. It's the natural complement to what it is that you're paying attention for. And then, of course, the content you publish is another key component, and how you differentiate that content is really important because that's how people communicate. And that content, by the way, when I say content, I'm not just talking about lengthy blog posts or videos or photos or that kind of stuff. It could be anything that you put out, as small as a tweet, as large as a Facebook update or blog post rather. There's also your presence. How is your overall presence across the social web? Is it consistent? Have you humanized your brand? Have you developed a brand strategy so that you have a persona for who you are and what makes your brand tick? One of the most overlooked areas that we're going to talk about is management behind the scenes. Excuse me. How do you organize your company around social? Is your company organized around social? Do you have people dedicated to it? Are there policies and procedures in place? And finally, measurement. One of the things I always tell people, and we're going to talk about this at the end, is if you're measuring the wrong stuff, chances are your social media is never going to be on track because you're never looking at the right metrics that are going to define success for your company. One of the best pieces of advice that you can walk away with is if your measurements don't impact the bottom line, you're probably doing something wrong. And I'll explain that as we get into this a little bit further. But when I think back about what Delta did right, they really fell into 3 of the areas of standout. They did a great job at paying attention. They knew who I was and had a solid understanding that I had communicated with them and were very timely in how they got back to me. Their interaction was really the biggest thing that stood out because it was so personalized. And again, that interaction was personalized to me based on the fact that they were paying attention, so they kind of go hand in hand. Now, management, I've highlighted as something that Delta did that stood out. Now, the fact of the matter is Delta, the world's largest airline, had one person dedicated to social at the time. Now, it's not so much that there was one person, and because of where they were, but it's more that they knew when that tweet came in, they understood it, they had a workflow behind the scenes that meant that Rachel was going to follow up with me directly. Those are the things that stood out to me as I look at that, and some people might argue that you can take content and put it in there and make that mix. The point and the reason I bring this up is because brands that do a good job in a few areas, so they do a really good job at some specific parts of what I'm describing as developing a standout strategy, is they can still stand out. It doesn't have to be, you're knocking it out of the park on all 6. You can have something good in place for all 6 and still, do 3 really, really well. And some of the examples that we're going to cover throughout the presentation are going to highlight that for you. So first I want to jump in and talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. And the first is paying attention. It's the heart of your social strategy. This involves listening and paying attention to specific behaviors and most importantly, individuals. I think one of the challenges that a lot of brands have felt with social media and social marketing specifically is that when you talk about words like listening or monitoring, what people are really monitoring for is the conversation, and they forget to monitor the individual people. So if you're dealing with a large audience and you're dealing with even a small audience, who are the people that make up that audience? What is it they're saying? Is an individual now, not just the overall Uber group, is their individual sentiment positive or negative? And does it change? When does it change? How do you follow up with people when it does change? How do you focus on those areas? So the big area of focus for me and what I want to focus on as part of the chapters that focus on paying attention is the ideas of social prospecting and social scoring. And to illustrate it, I want to give you an example. Let's say, for example, that we are selling running shoes. We're going to campaign for running shoes. Well, typically, the way that would normally go out and campaign is traditionally to broadcast a message to a very large, very wide audience. And yeah, would be very smart about how we did it, and would collect data, and would probably demographically target people. We might open stores in specific areas where a lot of those people live, and would drive people to online or offline purchases. On the social web, things are different because we have the opportunity to pay attention. We would probably start to listen if we were going to take a strict social strategy. of listening for conversations that might have something to do with buying shoes. Now, some of them might be very explicit. They might be people saying, hey, I need new shoes for an office party. Where should I buy them? And would want to join that conversation. Others might be less, they might be more implicit. It might be, I'm in month 2 of marathon training and I'm feeling better, or I'm taking a huge ski trip at the end of the month with the guys and I can't wait to be there, or I really hate back to school shopping for kids. Now, all of those, while not explicitly saying, hey, I need to buy a new pair of shoes, are implicitly saying that, that maybe it's something that we should be looking at, and it should be conversations that we want to follow up with. Now, what's great about this is you can really hyper-target the individuals within those audiences based on what it is that they're saying, based on what it is that they're doing, as long as we're spending the time and dedicating the resources to paying attention to those groups. Really what it's about is turning the social web into a marketing database almost, and scoring allows you to find those prospects and convert them into customers. And I say prospects and customers and deals and closing sales and that kind of thing, but there's a whole bunch of other applications for social scoring and prospecting. You could identify high potential to buy, or people who are influencers, or partner candidates, or really strong customers and advocates that we have in our brand that we didn't know even existed. Now, you probably think this all sounds great, Mike, and I love it. It sounds something that my company would probably be interested in doing, but the question is, how do you do it? And so what I did is I broke out the big 3 of monetizing by paying attention. How do you do this? How do you pay attention through social scoring to generate results? And there are really 3 components to it. One I call social prospecting, the other I call social profile collection, and the third I call social scoring, which is what we just talked about. Social prospecting is all about listening for specific keywords around actions. And it's about understanding who it is that make up your audience, and not so much listening for the keywords and pulling back the content, but understanding the people that are having those conversations. So if the example is Pella Windows, who I hope everybody on the line knows, some of the stuff you may want to look at are things like, are they mentioning our brand? Are they mentioning specific types of products? Are they talking about buying, problems that they have with other windows? Are they taking are the individuals taking some kind of action at home, like a home construction or remodeling, or adding putting an addition on the house that may require people to look at, a set of windows? And what you'll find is as you do these things, looking at the implicit versus explicit buying signals, you're going to find people who are very explicit about what they want, looking to buy windows. Does anybody have experience with Pella? And we've done a ton of research on this at the office. We find that there's people that do that very explicitly, and there are people that make more implicit comments like, I just started working on the addition, or just bought the new house and I'm getting ready to move in next week, or I can't get this draft to stop. It's really cold in here. All conversations that someone at Pella should want to participate in, and most importantly, not for let's collect the content and see the sentiment around Pella Windows. I'm not saying that's not important, but chances are it's not going to lead directly to a sale, whereas this will. Because when you do, what you're doing is looking to collect what I call a social profile. And a social profile are all the things that make up an individual on the social web. Whether or not we like it, if you're on social media, we leave a trail of breadcrumbs on all the different sites we go to. That includes the posts we make, the comments we make, the likes, the dislikes, the photos we share, the videos we view. Everything we do creates an image of who we are and what makes us tick. And if you've done any type of marketing automation, if you even have a form up on your website, you know that the amount of fields you can collect from a form is very limited. In fact, most of the time it's somewhere around 7, and that includes demographic information of information you can collect from someone. On social media, it's so rich. There's so much information that we can collect. It's literally hundreds of fields, all ripe to be scored. Some of them come from public posts and actions on social networks. Others come from engagement. Others come from participation in Facebook contests or downloads directly on your site. The point is we collect all this information, pull it together, then you have a really rich tool to work from that you can score. Now, going back to that running example, let's say we're going to develop scoring criteria that is going to define people who are really likely to buy a set of running shoes for this company that we were talking about before. And I actually did some work with a shoe company a little while back, and one of the things that they knew is that marathon runners are really likely to buy shoes about 3 months before a race. In fact, they're most likely to buy equipment in that time frame, and it makes a lot of sense because you want to break in the shoes, you want to make sure that the stuff fits, you want to make sure that what you're doing works. And I said to them, well, that's great. What do you do with that information? They said, well, at the time, they said we it's very easy for us. We we put banner ads up on, Runner's World, and if they're running the Boston Marathon, we'll do it on Boston.com or things like that. And I said, well, why don't you go directly to the people who are blogging about it? And I'm not going to call anybody out in the line, but I'm sure there are people in the line who actually run marathons, and I'm sure we all have friends that do. I can't stand these people, by the way, because it just makes me feel completely out of shape, that love to jump online and talk about how many miles that they've ran. I ran, 85 miles today, and I'm still feeling good, and I can't wait for the big race and all that stuff. The point is, people love sharing this information. If you could target the people who are blogging about it, and you have that idea of what is going to take someone and when they're going to purchase, we have all the information you need to target them in a way that makes a lot of sense. So the first step in social scoring, after you've gone out and identified the keywords and you've started to collect profiles, is to track their engagement before an event. And believe it or not, buying running shoes can start up to 12 months beforehand when people start blogging and tweeting about their training program. And it can go through a whole time frame right down to 3 months where they're likely to buy new shoes and even more than shoes, but equipment that's going to allow them to do stuff. And what you can do is map out what I call a path to purchase is. So map out the entire path to purchase from when people will start looking at something to when they make the decision to buy something, and decide on what behaviors A, you're looking for, and B, how you're going to react to it. What kind of marketing action are you going to take to identify those, not just identify those people, but communicate with them in a way that makes sense. And it usually involves around creating a dialogue and making sure that you have the stuff in place to follow up with them. Now, all the way, what you should be doing is creating a scorecard. Now, a scorecard incorporates anything that happens on social, and this is very social specific, but also your offline stuff. So if they tweet with specific keywords in it, we're going to give them a point. If they engage directly with our corporate Twitter account, we're going to give them a couple of points. And if they join our Facebook group, we're going to give them some points. All the while, people are collecting these scores behind the scenes in their profile. And as they're taking more actions, they're bubbling up to the top so we know who they are. Then we can start to target offers at them and even tier that database of individuals that we've collected based on the scores that they have. So, for example, people that score over 50, we want to follow up with them directly with an offer. People that score between 25 and 50, we want to communicate with them via some kind of dialogue on a biweekly basis, however it goes. And there are a whole bunch of different things and different categories that you can use to create these, and this is actually a lot of fun. We're actually in the process of working with. I'm actually in the process of working with some very large. One's a TV company. We're doing all their primetime shows. We're actually working out the scorecard to identify influencers, people who are not just influential for a show, but for a genre, for a day of the week, for a whole bunch of different stuff, which is a lot of fun. And things can be very different as you go through from company to company, as you can imagine. Now, in action, what this looks like is, you're able to look at the entire social web and a vast universe of people who are communicating and identify someone who's a prospect, an influencer, a buyer, a partner, an advocate, a customer, and track what they're doing and continue to add points until they get to an inflection point. That inflection point, if you're a B2B company, could be, all right, we're going to route them over to the sales reps to follow up with because we have enough information on them, or if you're a B2C company, maybe it's something transactional. We're going to have them buy a ticket or whatever it is. You can actually serve that up as long as you're tracking them the right way. And what this allows you to do is essentially flip the marketing model on its head and look at the entire social web as your database and start to market directly to individuals. Now, there's a bunch of examples of this that I give in the book, and actually takes up quite a bit of content. So I didn't do justice even in these slides getting into the details on everything there, but I do want to give some examples of companies that are doing this really, really well. I had lunch with a friend of mine recently, and he was having lunch with a real estate agent from Louisville. And what's interesting is we sat down, and as we started talking, I was talking to the real estate agent, who I'm going to keep nameless. He asked that I keep nameless. But I said, so how do you get your leads? How do you do your job? And he said, well, we generate I generate all my leads through Twitter. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, how do you do it? And he said, well, it's real easy. I wait, and people that say I'm moving into specific districts, I send them a packet of information that talks about the housing areas, which area to live in, what the going rate is, what the median prices are, what the school system's like, all that stuff. And it's not a very sales-focused thing, but I send them a nice packet of information. And I said, well, what's your conversion rate? And he said, well, it's around 30%. So if you're a real estate agent, and if you have friends that are real estate agents, ask them if a 30% conversion rate on people you send materials to, or if you're anything in marketing, is a 30% conversion rate on people you send materials to good. He said, I get about 3 out of 10 of them actually become clients, and I end up working with them. this guy's cranking it off the charts when he wants to get leads. He's at a point now where he can actually select whether or not he needs to go back out and engage with people directly because he has so much business right now in the area, which is great. Louisville, not a hot real estate market, by the way, for anybody wondering at home, but he's doing very well. TriNet is a B2B company that found out, and they look back at the behaviors their customers were taking, and they realized that when customers have big events, when I talk about big events, it's a funding event, not just a funding event, but if a CEO leaves or a new CEO comes in, if they hire a new person on the executive team, that their software sells much better. So they listen for those events, they listen for people talking about them, and then they go out and make offers at them directly. IBM has people spend their spare time, and this is a great case study that's highlighted in the book, is they have people spend their spare time what they call listening for leads. Ed Lin launched the program, and what he does is have people actually log into a system where they listen for individual leads and serve them up to the sales team based on the communication and behaviors that they're having. And another great example is Roger Smith Hotel, who literally created as they relaunched their brand and became an incredibly popular hotel by marketing specifically to bloggers and identifying them before they came to New York City, saying, hey, you should swing by our hotel. We have a blogger rate of X% off, and it is now a hot spot for bloggers in the New York City area, but not just bloggers, because everybody that goes in there ends up talking about how great it is. They're world famous for their bacon if you're ever in the New York City area. But a lot of great examples of how companies are actually doing this on a very micro level. And here's one that one of my favorite personal stories is a company called Foil Cupcakes. 94% of their sales come from Twitter. If you don't know the story of Foil Cupcakes, what's really interesting is they have literally 0 physical locations. This is a company that sells cupcakes via the internet. They've been featured on Oprah. They've been featured on a whole bunch of shows. They have no physical locations where you can go in and buy cupcakes. Everything is shipped and sent and delivered via the internet. 94% of the sales come through Twitter. And the big question is, well, how do you identify people who are interested in buying cupcakes? And they don't. What they do is they understand who their audience is. So Marie Lundgrath, who owns the company, took to Twitter and started communicating with people who were in her target demographic, women between the ages of 25 and 45, and communicating with them about things that she likes, specifically buying shoes and chocolate. And what she found is that without saying to people, I run a cupcake company or saying you should come over and buy cupcakes, people became intrigued by the conversations they were having with her, went to her site, and eventually started buying cupcakes. It's been a really great success story for them, and I highly recommend not just interacting with them on Twitter, but if you do live in the Chicago area, which is all they deliver to right now, I highly recommend ordering some of the cupcakes. They are awesome. I think I've gained like 10 pounds from them just by myself when I'm in the area. So that just covers the paying attention part, and as you can imagine, there's a lot more to talk about, especially when you consider that paying attention usually leads to some kind of interaction. What I want to talk to you about is something that I call the interaction continuum. There are different phases of how people will interact with you. Before that point of first interaction, and as they go forward, you'll have people that fall into the extended audience category, people that are friends of friends. You can think of them as the people that get updates that your friends like. Hopefully, at some point, you can convert them into liking what it is that you've done or following what it is that you've done, where they actually interact with you individually. They become passive followers, where they're going to, they may do some very light interaction, but for the most part, they're just watching the stuff that you put out as it appears in their stream or feed. Next, you have moderate interactors who are interacting a little bit more frequently. They become active, and then there's also another category of influential. Now, at each area, there's different things to pay attention to. So your extended audience, a tip for engagement, a tip for interacting with these folks is sharing a lot of photos and videos. Now, you can't see the thing on the right, and I promise if you download the slides, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. But Mercedes is a great example of sharing photos and videos. I just looked at their data from September 2011. And posts containing photos or videos generated over 230% more likes, over 300% more comments, and well over 1,000% more shares. Now, this is a stat that is specific to Mercedes, but it's something that's been documented by several other folks in the area that say people are highly engaged when it comes to photos and videos, and they become much more liked and much more commented. So if you want to get those out, if you want to get that ability out to your extended audience, one of the ways to do it is through sharing photos and videos. As you look at your passive followers, they're the silent observers. And the big recommendation I make is ask questions. Ask questions that are going to stir an interaction with these folks. Ask them, do they like this? Open it up to the entire audience. Make it something very simple that they can engage with, so that they will comment back or like or give a quick reply. Your moderate interactors are constantly viewing what you have there, so consistency becomes very key. Making sure that you publish consistently on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is basis, that your content is contextually relevant to what it is that they're looking for. Now, I'm not saying it all has to be about the same subject, but just stuff that's gonna keep them engaged and keep them regularly interacting. Your active ones are the people you want to turn into champions. These are the folks that you want to highlight as people that are just your super, uber, unbelievable fans. Social Media Examiner does a great thing where they highlight their top fans. They actually break down the people that are most engaged in their site, and they give them points and rewards. A lot of other sites do this. Yelp does it. A lot of other organizations out there focus on the people that are the most active, because they know enabling them only spreads the word, only helps to spread the word. And your influential folks are the people who are both active with your brand. They're active in some way with your brand, in some way, shape, or form, but they're also very influential in your industry. So a great tactic to get those people even more engaged is through guest posts and blogging. And it's something actually we do here at Awareness. And without getting into any specific names, if you head over to our blog, you'll see a few folks that are both big fans of our company, but are also very influential in our space. And we ask them to either guest post with us or participate in a webinar. We do a lot of that, and it's been incredibly successful for us over the years. The content that you publish is key. People will tell you all the time that content is key, and if you're looking to get a huge amount of data, I know it's about my book, but I got to make a couple of recommendations on a couple of other books if you're listening, and you're looking for something to talk about content. There's one called Content Rules that's written by Ann Handley and C.C. Chapman. It's an unbelievable book. They do a great job of breaking down content and how to use the content and where to leverage it. The other book that I'd recommend is a book called Get Content, Get Customers, written by a gentleman by the name of Joe Pulizzi. And what he breaks down is how to leverage content to stimulate engagement, to drive more revenue. And he does a great job at that as well. They're both terrific books, and I recommend them both. So if you're looking to get a lot more detail on content, you can get a bunch from my book, but also check out those guys as well. They do a great job. A couple of key concepts for this is repurposing content to drive additional interactions. Everybody's different. There are different things that are going to stimulate me to respond than probably everybody else in the line. So some key concepts are outlining your home base and outposts and content mapping. Multi-purposing content is huge. So if you have a home base, usually for most companies it's a blog. I always recommend that the cornerstone of your social marketing strategy is a blog, a place where all content can reside. But then to take that content and distribute it out to other channels. So a single piece of content could result in an additional blog post. It could result in downloads. It could result in an ebook or white paper. It could result in photos. It could result in video or slide presentations, or even a much bigger white paper that can get distributed to other social networks. The viral nature of something can lead to really significant results when you compound everything together. So one of the stats again that we looked at, and I looked at every Awareness customer to come up with this one, but content published to more than 3 channels increases engagement by over 30%. And again, that's a number that continues to go up as you start to distribute it more. Marketo takes the concept to another level. I think Marketo does a great job with their content. They do an unbelievable job not only distributing content to multiple channels, which is really important, but also targeting the content at different individuals. So they know who their buyer personas are. They have a really solid understanding of who their buyer personas are. And they do something called content mapping, which they actually put content out that's designed specifically for each type of buyer. That's important because as they enter and come back into a scoring model, with Marketo, they have a really good idea of who these people are, what makes them tick, and what their buying process is. So they know the behaviors that they're looking for. They understand how these people work, and they understand how they can convert them. As you look at presence, building and managing your brand persona is really important. A lot of marketers, and I admit I've fallen victim to this in the past, do a great job at understanding the personas of your audience and do a really bad job of understanding the persona of your company when it comes to social media. A couple of companies that do it really well are the ones that both humanize the brand but keep it consistent. And I'll give you a couple of examples. For any of you familiar with UFC, Dana White, who is their he's an interesting guy. I'll say he'll say whatever comes to his mind, but he's humanized the UFC brand in a really important way. He takes to talking to the audience. He loves having communication and just chatting with people. He's done a great job at humanizing the brand. Another great example of a humanized brand is Red Bull on social. They do a terrific job of making themselves and fitting into a specific persona. I mean, they had someone jump out of an airplane in space the other day and do the biggest skydive. I think it was a few weeks ago. I mean, this is important because it ties into their whole You Got Wings strategy. It ties into their overall persona. It ties into the market that they're trying to get, and it makes them very human to the people that are following them. Another great example of brand consistency and actually creating a humanized brand is Mashable. You can see just by looking at the screens that it's incredibly consistent across all channels who this is, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. Now, it may seem like an obvious thing, well, keep your brand consistent. There are plenty of opposite examples I could pull up, and I'm not going to, of companies that are incredibly inconsistent across channel, and they're inconsistent two ways. One is the overall look and feel, and the other is the messaging. There's nothing worse, and there's nothing that can turn a customer off than seeing inconsistent messaging across channel. And there have been some great stories of very highly well-known, reputable brands that have been caught by having a multi-channel strategy with inconsistent messaging across them. So something very important to keep in mind as you put content out. Now, from a management standpoint, this is one that always gets overlooked internally at companies until it's too late. And what I mean by that is, how do you develop the internal workflow, procedures, policies, all the stuff that you need to manage from a back end system to make sure that you're doing the right stuff and consistent across all the channels that you work with. Now, a great example of this is what happened last year at the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl in Indianapolis. Now, I'm a Patriots fan, so I hate talking about last year's Super Bowl, obviously, because they lost. But what Indianapolis did was something really interesting. They had a team of 50 people to manage all the interactions of fans that had come to the Indianapolis area to be part of the Super Bowl. And their whole job was just to make sure that they got to where they needed to go on time, and they had the right, they knew where the Patriots fans were hanging out and where the restrooms were and where the right hotels are to stay in and that kind of stuff. But they had a team of 50 people, and you can imagine that, and these are 50 people that some of them were interns, some of them were college students, some of them were employees of specific companies that all came together to help with this. The policies and procedures on the back end of this had to be really sharp, really crisp, and had to make sure that everybody was on the same page before they did stuff so no one stepped on each other's toes. Now, what's interesting is when I talk to the folks that put this on and they say, we did $3.2 million in value, the truth is one of the coolest things that they did is that they were able to find a handful of lost children that got separated from their parents down there. And people talk about social media ROI. To me, that's a huge ROI for this story. But great example of a company that put the right policies and procedures in place to make sure that everything was done right. And you can actually check them out. I have an infographic up on the site if you just type in Super Bowl. Another great example of it, and it's an example that has been used over and over again, and that's JetBlue. You can see just looking at their Twitter stream. And by the way, just a heads up, I borrowed this slide from Eric Qualman, and I forgot to put the footnote on the bottom here, but he's actually the one that put the slide together, and I use it with permission and admiration. He's actually the author of a book called Socialnomics, which you should check out as well. But you can see that one screenshot of the JetBlue Twitter stream has a bunch of stuff going on for different areas of the company, from PR to service, sales, crisis, recruitment, product, a whole bunch of different areas. The question is, who's supposed to respond to this and how quickly they're supposed to do it? It's really awesome to see how they do it, and they have a whole team behind the scenes and workflow built to make sure that they are routed to the right person follows up. Because organization is so important, especially at companies like this where you do see so many different types of requests coming in simultaneously. I'm not going to get into this. This is an eye chart, so just ignore it. All I'm going to say is this is a chart from the Altimeter Group that talks about different ways that organizations organize internally. Again, I'll send you the slides after, but if you're looking for it, you can do social media organization, search social media organization and Altimeter, and this will pop up. If not, you can check out Jeremiah Owyang, Owyang, his blog, and this is part of his blog as well. Finally, measurement. And when I talk about measurement, what I want to focus on is something I like to call Social Romy and Social Romo. Social Romo, not to be confused with the quarterback from Dallas. It's actually a way that we calculate return on marketing objectives as opposed to return on marketing investment. Now, these are both social things. What we're looking at is Romy, on one hand, is the bigger picture stuff. This is all the stuff you have going on in marketing and how to calculate it in terms of how successful or unsuccessful your social program has been. Marketing objective, the Romo part, is around looking at individual campaigns and understanding how that works. And now you can find this again up on the blog. The way to calculate it is really starting by adding up all your marketing expenditures. That includes people and resources, your budget, your tech investments, determining the results to the bottom line and calculating it, and it comes out as a percentage. And again, that's done on an annualized basis. The same thing is important on your Romo, your objective calculation. So it's looking at the impact that you've had from social in different campaigns that you're running. You can look at number of leads, you can look at number of sales if you're that far along, or if you're a B2C company. But really determining the results based on how it works. And a lot of companies do it, break it down to other examples like reach, growth, and engagement. And you can do that as well just by taking the same math and applying it to the individual numbers. Lastly, and I'm not going to get into these specifically, there are a whole bunch of other metrics that you can apply to different areas of your business that are very ROI focused. They start with conversions, reach and relevance, interactions, activity ratio, content effectiveness, brand sentiment, inbound links, and influence. Combined, when you look at all these together, at the end of the day, what I'm shooting for and what I guide you towards is to develop a really solid ROI and understanding of how your social marketing programs are impacting the bottom line results of your company. So, Sal, I know I went through this kind of quick, and I am going to leave this up here. You can find all this stuff on the blog. Please go back and check out the website and download any of this content. I'm happy to share it with you or answer any questions for you, Sal. That's what I got.
Great. So just a reminder to everybody, we've reached the Q&A section of today's presentation. So there's two ways to submit your questions. You could submit them in WebEx via the Q&A. You can also submit them on Twitter at Awareness Inc. Again, Awareness Inc. is the hashtag that we are monitoring. So, Mike, I had a question here to get us started. Humanizing the brand. So, when is it appropriate to use an actual person if one is not sort of naturally appropriate, like Dana White? And it makes sense for Dana White to be the human face of UFC, but not ever, or Pete Cashmore for Mashable. But not every brand has that. So is that necessary to actually have a person, or is that not necessary? How do you pick your person? When is it appropriate to say we don't have a person like this, so let's create one, let's invent one, things like that?
Yeah, and actually, in a lot of ways, the best way, and that's a great question, by the way, the best way to do it is, and what I always lean towards is actually not have a person. Now, some companies have gotten themselves, so Robert Scobelizer started off at Microsoft, and he was kind of the evangelist there in social, and of course left and is now doing his own thing. And Microsoft had to go back and figure out who the next person was going to be the voice of the brand. Not everybody has evangelists like that. But the fact of the matter is turning your company into a personalized, humanized brand is just as important. And that's actually what Red Bull has done. There's not the Red Bull person. I mean, there's a couple of people at Red Bull that tweet on their behalf and do stuff. But Red Bull in itself is a freestanding entity, and they're a brand. So, for them, it's about looking at it and saying we want to humanize who we are as a company, as an organization, and present our persona in a way that makes sense to us, to the overall market. So it doesn't have to be an individual. It doesn't have to be someone. I mean, even here, at Awareness, I mean, we're Awareness Inc. There is not an individual that's talking on behalf of the brand. We talk on behalf of the brand, but we're primarily using the Awareness Inc. stuff. So the right way to find it, it depends. You're looking for a blend of people that number one, get how to respond and how to interact and understand the policies and procedures of the company, of course, but also people who aren't afraid to respond and put their comments out there and want to hear back from the people that are talking to them. So usually they fall in the marketing department, although it seems some people come out of, believe it or not, customer service and even product as well, where they just have a natural rapport with people and can convert that in-person rapport to online rapport as well.
Great. We have a question here, just to flash that slide about the Altimeter Group and that information that they provided, and just sort of cover that again. Just someone's looking for a little bit more information about that, because I know that we went through it kind of fast. So do you want to maybe go over that just quickly?
There's an awful lot to go over, and I think it would take a lot of time out of the Q&A to go through the entire slide from beginning to end, which is why I kind of skipped it. That said, though, There is a ton of information, including, shots and everything, screenshots of what makes up each one of these models in, the Altimeter Group section. And essentially what it boils down to is how organizations organize behind the scenes through social. And what Jeremiah Ouyang, who's one of the principal analysts who put this together at Altimeter, did, which is really smart, is he looked at the companies that that he had worked with, did a bunch of surveys, and came up with different ways that people organize. And what it serves as is a great guide for anybody on the line to say, all right, I fall into this centralized model. We really want to get to a coordinated model where we're doing all this stuff together, or maybe centralized works really well for us. And that's really what it serves to do, is to define where you are and where you want to go. So you can almost think of it as a benchmark type of guide. I don't want to get into each one, Sal, because I think it'll take up a lot of time. But just to say to people that it's a theory, it's a way on how people organize around social, and it's a great resource if you're trying to figure out how to do stuff on the back end.
Great. Again, a reminder to the audience, we have two ways to submit questions. One is in the WebEx chat. You can also submit questions on Twitter at #AwarenessInc. I have a question here. I'm going to change it a little bit. So there was a small business question. What is the biggest misconception for small businesses for building an audience on the social networks? But I'm going to just change it to what have you found to be the biggest misconception by small businesses on the concepts of standout social marketing?
All right. I think the biggest misconception is we're just going to build it and people will come. I think people have this really strange idea in their head that I'm just going to throw up a website a Facebook page, and all of a sudden I'm going to have 1 million people, on it, and I don't really need to do anything to curate that and grow and foster that audience. I think, the biggest thing that brands can do is start by, doing what they probably already are doing, and even especially at small companies, understanding who the people are that are buying their product or service, and developing content around that and targeting that content at individuals. It starts really by listening and then joining the conversation, so becoming part of it. And there's a bunch of ways to go out and do it that we've illustrated that you can engage your audience in a way that you don't have to be a huge company to do. In fact, a lot of small companies do a very successful. Foil Cupcakes is a small company. I mean, they're a very small company, but have been incredibly successful at being different on social because of really how they listen. They understand their audience so well that they know what they're interested in and are going to have conversations with them about those interests. And, oh, by the way, we're also selling cupcakes. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be as easy for everybody else, but I think the single biggest misconception is we're just going to throw up a Twitter account or Facebook page or whatever, and all of a sudden we're going to have 1 million people and they're all going to be buying our product. It just doesn't work that way.
A couple questions coming in. Again, questions you submitted on Twitter at #AwarenessInc or in the WebEx chat. A couple people asking about, is the information going to be available after the webinar? The answer to that is yes. You will be able to download the slides and view a recording of the presentation. We'll probably get that processed and emailed out to you tomorrow, if not Monday. So just take a look at your inbox. We have an interesting question here, and I'd like to get your take on it. I do have a take on this because, spoiler alert to the audience, I have read Standout Social Marketing, and that's kind of what we do here at Awareness. So I had a question.
I want to hear your take then.
Yeah. Well,
I already want to hear your take.
Sure. Question here is, do you think sweepstakes are the right way to get more fans on Facebook? I think that's somewhat of a general question. So knowing the information in Standout Social Marketing, hearing the 6 keys of the book, what I would say to that question is you're kind of asking the wrong question. So sweepstakes are a good way to get more fans on Facebook. There's lots of good ways to get fans on Facebook. But if you're looking for sweepstakes as, gaining fans as being the end goal, you're kind of missing the point of Standout Social Marketing. And I'll give you an example. With Standout Social Marketing, we're talking about data. We're talking about listening to conversations, getting data, filling in the blanks, finding out about people based on their actions and on their engagement, and then segmenting those people. So when I think about sweepstakes, I think about, okay, I have this audience on Facebook. I know some things about them, but I don't know everything, because they haven't filled out something important on Facebook on their profile, or they haven't made it public or anything like that. So sweepstakes can be an answer to that. So if I'm trying to target based on a specific variable, and I don't have enough of that variable filled out in my social audience, I can run a sweepstakes that asks them to fill out that variable, fill out that question. Once I have that via the sweepstakes and I have that integrated into the rest of the data that I have on that person, now I can further segment my audience. Now I can, take those actions based on what I know about the audience, segmenting that audience, customizing my message towards that audience. So I look at Facebook sweepstakes as just filling in more information and getting more data on a person, rather than just sort of a tool to get more fans. So how did I do, Mike?
I think it was great. Yeah, you definitely read the book. That's good.
Yeah, I did. So let's see what I'm done with my take. Let me see if you have any more questions. Again, questions can be submitted on WebEx, or they can be submitted on Twitter at #AwarenessInc. Let's see here. Focus on measurements. Okay, a question on measurement about what tools do you recommend? What sort of automation is possible with measurement?
Oh man, I mean the sky's the limit, and that I think that's one of the challenges right now is there's very broad categories in the software side of social marketing. Now, if you're looking to get more granular stuff, you're probably it starts out where you're probably using some kind of engagement platform, Hootsuite, TweetDeck, that kind of thing to get your content out. The real question is what it is you want to measure on the back end of everything. And what I'd encourage people to do is start looking at that measurement on the plane of what's impacting the bottom line. So, some of the tools you may want to consider using for that are tying in the stuff that you're doing with social to your CRM, customer management, or web analytics tools, and specifically through simple things like appending URLs with codes and tags at the end, so that you can actually figure out where people are coming from and what they're clicking through and whether they downloaded something or that kind of stuff. That's most important. I think if you're looking at, in the listening space, there's something like 300 vendors right now of companies that just handle listening and monitoring. The social media marketing software space, there's probably a handful of vendors, and I'm happy to be part of. I'm proud to bring up Awareness. We're the only ones that's doing all this kind of stuff in one, but there's a bunch of options out there for you, and what I always tell people is start small. I mean, there's even free tools out there that you can start to use until you get to a point where you're realizing you need something to do more of this because you've proved out the value of what it is that you're doing. So it's free tools like even using something as simple as I've seen people use Google Alerts to get notified on specific things that happen, and use that as a way to jump into this before they can actually prove stuff out.
Great. Let's see. Sorry, I'm taking a look at what's coming in. We're right up against it, so I think that we're going to have to end it there. I want to just leave the audience with a couple of reminders. First of all, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for being so engaged. I saw a lot of people logged in, and I didn't see a lot of people drop off, so we must have been doing something right. But as follow-up, again, we will send you the recordings. We also have Chapter 1 of Standout Social Marketing is up at awarenessnetworks.com. If you click over to our learning section, you'll see it under our white paper, so that's a free download. I encourage anybody to download. I encourage anybody to also purchase the book for yourself. It is available on Amazon. Also, follow Mike with the contact information that he's made available. Tweet him, email him, and he'd be happy to contact you. And with that, Mike, thanks again for a great webinar, and we will talk to everybody soon.
Thanks, everyone.